Thank you very much, Chair. Madam President, I want to especially acknowledge you and thank you for this opportunity to be part of this discourse on energy transition and climate change. May I stand on the existing protocol? If you could just put up the slide, please. I bless the Lord God Almighty for the privilege to be here. My name is Gershon Obindah, a senior faculty in Covenant University. I also chair a center for economic policy and development research. I'll try to use the time left to contribute to the discourse. Please, let's go to the next slide. Go ahead, please. What I would do is try to avoid the temptation of responding or contributing to the very insightful presentation made by the lead speaker and Professor Gaji. I'll try to expand the scope of our discourse this afternoon by bringing in external context to enrich our discussion. So when we say net zero carbon emission economic era, that's where we are today. And in the context of that, you have a global energy transition and the energy trilemma, where you have increasing demand for energy, increasing cost of energy, increasing impacts on the environment, going by what we are consuming at present. But in addition to that is increasing population, and then there is need for more energy to be provided while not damaging the environment. Then you have the carbon pricing implications of all of this on humanity. Please, let's go ahead. I'll be a bit fast. In addition to this context is the mega trends, technological, economic, and climate change trends that we're seeing. Large data sets, data analytics, artificial intelligence, increased connectedness of machines, peoples, and markets. We know about 3D printing, climate change agreements, the carbon pricing, the heat waves that is in the news, market uncertainties due to rapid changing geopolitical uncertainties. A lot of times when we want to think about energy transition or solving the energy issues in Nigeria and even Africa, we tend to ignore the fact that these mega trends are a reality and they interfere with how we perceive these changes. So I thought to bring that in addition to the context that has been set. Please, let's go ahead. For instance, in a net zero carbon emissions economic era where carbon pricing is a policy issue in many developed countries. If the carbon price is set at $100 per ton, see what that does to the price of crude oil. The price of crude oil automatically would rise by $40 per barrel. There's a consequence for natural gas, and that of coal is obvious. What's my point? My point is in trying to conceive a strategy for energy transition, be it in Nigeria or in the African continent, it's important for us to realize that most of the developing countries, including China, that was initially reluctant, they're considering the reality of having carbon pricing in their economies. And these have serious consequences in how we conceive our own energy transition. Please, could we go to the next slide? Talking about energy for humanity, we can see the lights in European Union compared to the number of people who have access to electricity. Our lead speaker has emphasized this. But the key point which I think is important here, when we think about the energy trilemma, is if 8 months ago, the European Union is saying, look, gas should be thrown away. And now the European Union wants gas from everywhere in Africa. Then Africa needs to decide for itself. Yes, we have said we need to determine that optimal mix. But that optimal mix that we want to determine, optimal mix of energy resources to be used in Nigeria, Africa, should not be based on foreign technology. This is where we have missed it a lot of times, and I hope that we'll not miss it anymore. Because we can't use technology that we do not own to determine the optimal mix of the resources that we own. So Africa needs to make that decision. In sum, Africa needs well thought out strategy that is crucial to achieving the decarbonization that we need. The Glasgow Climate Pact that was signed a few months ago needs to be turned into specific policies and policy actions. In doing this, humanity matters most. In some climes, they're already thinking about reducing population in a bid to reduce the effect of energy on the environment. And so towards achieving energy for humanity, something that I think we need will be for Nigeria to lead the process to carve a new African Union Green Deal for this continent. We need to carve it out. Nigeria needs to be the leader in this regard. For instance, I'm putting a question for us to ponder about. Could African industries produce electric cycles, tricycles to neutralize emissions from the transport industry? That's a question. What about hydro? So I was putting a question across for us to ponder on as we go ahead in this discourse. Could African industries produce tricycles using indigenous technology? We have talked about solar as a form of hydro renewable energy. How about hydro renewable energy? We have pockets of water resources all over Nigeria. Is it not feasible for us to develop indigenous technologies that would enable us to use hydro without necessarily importing solar panels? It's feasible. Please, let's go ahead. I just want to round up. A few reflections if we're going to, how do we perceive the transition? Is it we against them? How do we perceive this transition? Is it oil-rich countries versus oil-importing countries? Or there needs to be an integrated solution? Is it investors versus government? How do we perceive this transition? The appropriate response will be a collective one, where we have an African Green Deal supported by the US and the EU. Should we replace all we have? Again, this has been hammered. Rather they should strengthen what we have. We do not have new technologies, and we do not have the skills to adopt these new technologies. And so it's important for us to think about what we have and work towards creating African technologies. Again, this is the Nigerian Association for Energy Economics. We are to drive this, if possible, through the new NMPC, driving these innovations. Please, can we go ahead with the slides as I round up? I will round up with a few questions. Why can't All On and the Niger Delta Power Holding Company invest in research endeavors? I mean, indigenous technologies. That's how Shell spends money to invest. So we shouldn't wait for the Schlumberger. We shouldn't wait for Halliburton. We don't need to wait for Julius Berger. We don't need to wait for, the oil servicing firms, because they are cutting down investments. They don't want to invest. Why can't the Niger Delta Power Holding Company invest in indigenous research to enable us find our own technology to explore our own natural gas? Working towards developing an optimal mix for using our local resources, based on technologies we do not have and we cannot afford is taking the wrong step. The second question I have in wrapping up my discussion is this. When we say a lot of renewables are cost effective, they are cheap, out of the 85 million persons in Nigeria who do not have access to the national grid, how many of them can pay for electricity? How many of them can afford solar power systems? Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Obindah, for the